So, hey everyone, thanks for having me here. My name's Clifton. I'm a designer at Google. And I'm here to talk a little about something that's a little bit not usual. So, I want to talk a little bit about collaboration and how we as designers can navigate and build strong collaborations with our cross-functional peers. So meet the three-legged stool. So you probably heard this analogy in many different places. So it's used in like business, marketing, or even religion. And without the strong support and equal support of all three legs, the stool is actually unusable. So I want to use this to represent a functional feature team that you might be familiar with, which consists of engineering, product, and UX. And of course, focusing on how we as UXers play a role here. And up to this point, I've journeyed through various different types of teams and companies, ranging from 10 employees to thousands. And the structure of the team and its processes and cultures is vastly different. And I hope you can find this talk useful so that you can take some of these techniques to your day-to-day work in teams both small and large. And I bet many of you in this room have heard these comments before. So a PM might come up to you and say like, hey, can you make this UI beautiful? Or can I get a bigger search icon? And you know what? Make the icon blue instead of gray. Or an engineer might come to you and say like, hey, I think this approach makes more sense. Why don't we do it this way? Or what you have is just going to take so much more time. Like, it's definitely not feasible. And a lot of these comments and frustrating discussions happen due to a lack of trust and understanding of each other's roles. You're not speaking the same language, or lacking channels to openly discuss ideas. And there might be other reasons as well, but these are kind of the top ones. So yes, the struggle is definitely real. As Eng, product, and UX triad work together, there's a lot of barriers and stereotypes to navigate. So that's why we're here to try to demystify and hope to give you a set of tools to collaborate more effectively. And today, I want to identify 3 key steps towards a successful cross-functional collaboration. First off is building an understanding of how you fit in. So remember kind of back to your first day in middle school, like when you walk into the campus, everything's new, you don't know anybody, you don't know how things work, and that's the type of feeling that I have when I start on a new team or even a new project. And when you find yourself in these situations, the first thing to do is always to develop environmental awareness, to understand the culture of the team and how decision-making works. And so it's kind of like understanding the processes, for a lack of better words. And knowing decision-making process will go a long way as you like mature and grow on the team. So you don't get held back by these things. And you typically see 3 different types of models on teams. So it could be like engineering-driven, which is a lot of the tech companies. You see product-driven teams, or maybe UX-driven teams in some agencies. And aside from team dynamics and processes, proactively build a solid understanding of the problem space. So think about things like who the users are, how are past decisions made, are priorities set yet, and what are the key journeys that I as the designer am solving for. Additionally, you want to understand what the expectations are within the team for you as a UXer. So is it for you to be the unicorn that kind of does everything? Or are you going deep on a specific feature as part of the broader product? So not only can you better optimize your work and be either more execution focused or more vision driven, but also a chance to see like how this role aligns with your personal growth. And sometimes this is hard to change, right? You're just put into a team and you can't do much about this. But it's important to create that understanding and awareness to set yourself up for success. Now, the second piece of puzzle is building trust. And I know this sounds really cliche, right? And sounds easy, but it's actually very tricky in practice. I'm sure a lot of you can understand. So let's try to unpack this a little bit. In the quest of building trust, it kind of comes down to this, becoming a collaborative expert. So what does this mean? So being an expert for UX would mean knowing and championing the design process and mastering the tools for your craft. Knowing the ins and outs of the product, right? So thoroughly understand the current state of things. And also developing a point of view. This takes a lot of time, but it actually goes a long way. And being collaborative means you proactively advocate for the users. You communicate effectively with your teammates. You're always intentional about your decisions and actions. And you also listen and you give feedback. Does anyone know who this guy is? So if you've seen the documentary, or if you're really into sneakers like me, you'll know this design legend. So Tinker Hatfield, he's the VP at Nike. He's a man behind a lot of iconic sneakers like the Air Jordans and the Air Max. In the documentary on Netflix called Abstract, if you haven't had the chance to check it out, definitely do so. He told a story about when Michael Jordan was actually considering leaving Nike. So he wasn't happy, and he shared how he approached the conversation with Michael Jordan. I thought it was very inspirational. And from that experience, he ultimately convinced Jordan to stay with Nike, and that's the Jordan brand that you see today. So it's really a pivoting point. So what went down during that time? So Jordan, he was very unhappy with his experience with Nike. He was playing golf and he came back. Tinker and the CEO of Nike at the time, they were waiting for like 3 or 4 hours already. So, like Jordan doesn't really care at that point. So after a quick introduction, Tinker kicked off the conversation, and he told Michael Jordan, he just said like, hey Michael, remember you wanted a mid-cut basketball shoes, but nobody is making mid-cut basketball shoes. This is exactly what you wanted. He also said, hey Mike, remember that you mentioned the shoes should always feel broken in. So when it's right out of the box, you don't feel like it's brand new and you have to wear it multiple times to take it on the basketball court. So this pair of shoes is made of really soft leather. And when you put it on, it's just gonna fit right in. Then he unveiled the shoes to Michael right there, and he was able to try it on and all that. But not only did he do that, he extended his vision and showed him like how that carries over to apparels, right? So on the left sketch here, you see a little bit of that. Now, after the meeting, Michael was so impressed that he stayed with Nike and worked with Tinker for many years after. And the CEO of Nike, Phil Knight, at the time, he said that this is the meeting when Tinker saved Nike. And tying back to what we just talked about, Tinker won Jordan's trust through being a collaborative expert. So coming back to our 3 legs, how do we apply this in context? So when working with product, position yourself as a product thinker. So remember, design isn't always just about the pixels. Get into the weeds with them and help them think through problems and overcome roadblocks in creative ways. Advocate and educate about what design thinking brings to the table. So success here means you're treated as a true partner and UX expert, and they lean on you for opinions. And of course, your PM respects the knowledge and what you bring to the table. And when working with engineers, position yourself as a collaborator, as someone who's willing to jump in and help figure out the best way to build. And better yet, be the person that speaks the same language. So now, it doesn't mean you really need to know how to code. You can actually get pretty far without being able to do so. And one of the things that we like to do is trying to build an understanding of engineering through a lot of logic-based prototyping tools such as Framer and Origami. And most importantly, keep an open mind to iterate on the product with them. So don't be too set on what you design. Oftentimes, engineers bring a lot of value and lead towards a better outcome. So success with engineers is when you can openly discuss ideas and iterate on the design with them. And to a point that they trust you, and they would do everything they can to realize what you've designed. Also, having a trick or two up your sleeves helps a ton in building trust. And what does this mean? Embrace your inner storyteller. So as designers, a lot of us are actually great storytellers. Maybe you just don't realize. So whiteboard is your best friend. And by that, it could be, during meetings, you're talking to product and engineering or other designers. Be proactive in helping the team visualize. It could be flows or just facilitating discussions during the meeting. Also, be acquainted with a few creative methodologies so you can apply it to the team. So not too long ago, an engineering manager came to me and said, "Hey, Clifton, we have a summit tomorrow, and I want the team to think about what we do for the next year." I was like, "Great, it's tomorrow. What do you have planned?" So she actually didn't have anything planned. So I better understood the goals and kind of the time we had, and I suggested, okay, so we should have a session to do post-it storming, and then we could do a crazy eights. And after the workshop, the team actually really loved going through that, and we got a ton of great ideas that we're all really excited about. And of course, there's the famous design sprint methodology, which a lot of people know about. But I recommend picking and choosing the bits and pieces that will work for your team and your timeline. And this is especially crucial if you're on a team where everyone's so busy and you can't get like 10 people in a room for 5 days. So last thing I'll leave you on trust is don't be the person that says no. Be the person that says not now. And this is something that I learned from a team lead on Playstore. It's a very simple but powerful concept. And it's a great way for you to communicate your intentions when you're having tough discussions with your peers. All right, lastly, find the right cadence. So we're all humans, and we have our own habits. It's very critical to find a cadence in working together. And I think it's pretty easy to imagine being easier to work with someone you know versus a complete stranger. And in my experience, putting in the time and effort to know your teammate goes a really long way. So for example, like what are their hobbies? Do they have kids? Where are they traveling later this year? So on and so forth. So showing that you care really opens up more facets of communication with a certain individual. Also, the rhythm of how people work is very different, right? So you can see on the right-hand side, like you might engage with different types of mediums at different times, and then there might be a meeting where you guys are all sitting together. And you need to adjust when you're going into a new team, and vice versa, your team will adjust to you. So don't hesitate to give each other feedback to improve this process and find the right tempo for you. And lastly, always celebrate the wins. Remind yourself the hard work that you put in and how it's paid off. And in the process, thank each other and show your appreciation for one another. So now, I'll give you an example of how these steps applied in a recent redesign of Google Play Store. So if you're an Android user, you've probably seen some of these updates already. We launched this in August this year. So it includes a brand new visual language, as well as new information architecture that's easier to navigate. And this effort involved many cross-functional peers and working through multiple quarters. And needless to say, it was a pretty difficult effort. There were technical complexities, resourcing issues, scoping, approvals, and cross-team alignments. It was pretty crazy. So first, I needed to understand how I can fit in, or how UX can fit in. So Playstore is a huge team. It's a product used by billions of users. And with that comes the baggage of metrics and revenue. So we're also dealing with a very complex and old code base that's been existing for many years. And we needed to catch up to the new material design language. So given this is a more design-led initiative, we also need to convince leadership on why we need to do this. And with some of the tools I mentioned, we created compelling visions to ignite conversations within the team and with leadership. And once the project is in flight, we really did our due diligence and went back and forth to scope and prioritize, and looking at how much time we have and how much we can take on. We built towards scalability with componentization. Also, we had to communicate with many other feature teams that were affected by this project. And in order to create a compelling vision, we did something I like to refer to as North Star visioning. So instead of completely thinking blue sky, we evaluated our user goals, our business needs, and constraints to create something that's compelling and more tangible. And better yet, instead of just being purely design-driven, we really involved our cross-functional teams early on, which helps a lot in getting teams on board. And when you think about doing North Star exercises, you can think about the positioning. So finding like what's the sweet spot and what's most helpful to the team at that time. In the context of Playstore, a shorter term North Star could be like, what does Playstore look like next year? But the longer term could be, what is the future of app and game distribution and discovery? And in our case, we started with the very long-term vision. We got a lot of wild ideas that people looked at and said like, wow, this is cool. So the purpose was to really build the excitement. And then we came back and said, okay, based on that, like this is what Playstore could be in 1 or 2 years. So we use that to develop concrete roadmaps with product and engineering, and eventually work towards a consensus and eventually approval to execute on the project. And throughout the process, we did many design exercises using these creative brainstorm methods. So it includes design jam, the longer sprints, and some work sessions. And kind of back to one of the big wins for us was establishing a common language with engineers around the components that we build in store, and the enforcement of semantic styling. And I know that this might sound surprising to many of you, but this wasn't the case before. So a lot of things were one-offs. There wasn't like a really centralized place for these components and styling. And this effort not only allowed us to build faster, but it created more alignments with teams, and also is a forcing function for us to go back and audit what we have and clean up the unnecessary. So I remember when talking to an engineer, my mind was literally blown when I heard like a simple card container, we had like 6 different implementations of it. And they all look kind of different, which is really bad from a design point of view. So given the intensity of the effort and aggressive timeline, building up the cadence was a really key for us. So we had regular syncs with multiple purposes throughout the week, and we discussed multiple dimensions. So kind of back to like the eng complexities, the resourcing. These things are always like changing throughout the project based on like more work that we put in and more things happening on other teams. And we also coordinated timelines with others because when we do such a big redesign effort in store, essentially all the feature teams are affected. So how do we coordinate that? So they don't launch something on the old UI when we're flipping over to the new UI. So there's so many coordinations that happen. And of course, we wanted to be efficient. So UX was always working ahead of engineering. And of course, we celebrated milestones. So not just the recent launch, but as we migrate and create components, like these are all small wins for the team, and we definitely celebrate it in the process. So let's recap on what we just talked about. So we talked about 3 steps to strengthen cross-functional collaboration. First, understanding how you fit in is really about being environmentally aware and understanding the problem space and expectations. And build trust by being a collaborative expert. So channeling your inner Tinker Hatfield, right? Be that person that says, hey, remember you said this? Here's how we can make it happen. We also talked about storytelling and how whiteboard being your best friend can make a difference, and getting the team engaged in creative methodologies and picking and choosing the best small pieces of these methodologies that works best for your team. And we also looked at how to frame yourself when you work with product and engineering respectively. So lastly, finding the right cadence through knowing each other more. Finding your team's tempo amongst all the tools and all the ways you're communicating. And don't forget to have fun and celebrate your work in the process. So again, back to the 3-legged stool. So I hope keeping these points in mind, we can strengthen the collaboration between Eng, product, and UX. And I often see myself being a designer, having unique skills and knowledge to kind of be the glue and guiding light on the team. So I hope that with some of the stuff I mentioned today, I've encouraged you to do the same. So thank you all again for being here. Please keep in touch. I look forward to hear about how you've thought about these points and how you've taken these to your team and building that strong 3-legged stool. So thank you very much.